I'd like to call the committee back to order. There we go. Will you bring in the witnesses, please?
Why are you taking pictures?
Mic's on. Ready? I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give to this honourable legislative assembly shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give to this honourable legislative assembly shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Good afternoon, Mr. Travers and Mr. Michael Alberga. We want to thank you for availing yourself to come here to give evidence today. And as you will both be aware, we are looking at the efficiency and effectiveness of the Utility Regulatory and Competition Office, commonly known as OFREG, on a report done by the Auditor General in June 2020. And what we had last week, we had evidence from the regulators, and what we wanted to get this week was the views of the people being regulated. And we want to find out whether you're satisfied with off-reg. Are you getting the kind of cooperation when cooperation is necessary? Are you getting enforcement when enforcement is necessary? And the only rule we have really is that the first time you answer a question, we want you to state your full name and your title so that it appears in the Hansard correctly. So I'd let Mr. Chris start off the questioning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I just want to welcome Mr. Travers and Mr. Alberga here this afternoon. Just to expand on what the chairman mentioned just a short while ago, is we want for this session to be more informational, more educational for the public. We recognize that fuel has only really been regulated for the last 3 years, so it is still a young industry in terms of regulation. And one of the, I must say up front, this is the one group that was actually looking forward to hearing from the most, because one of the things in order to really make this market effective is we need to get more competition. And as a new entrant in the market and recognizing that there are challenges and barriers to entry, we would really be keen to know like what it is that what can be done either from a legislative standpoint or from a regulation standpoint to make it more easier for your business to become more competitive against the two current giants that exist. So, and I think everyone can agree that it is in the public best interest that competition is actually pretty good. So with that said, one of the, as a fairly new entrant in the market, my first question is, sorry, as a fairly new entrant in the market, like what challenges have you seen thus far, things that you think we could have done a little bit better, or some of the things that we need to work on in order for the market to become more competitive with regards to the current situation that we have? Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Dow Travers, and I am the founder and CEO of Refuel. Shortly, our vision is to make modern emission-reducing renewable content fuels commonplace in Cayman. To address your question a little bit more directly, we've had several obstacles in our path to getting to where we are today, but to become more competitive at this point in the shortest term, we need to be able to expand, we need to be able to compete, we need to be able to increase our supply, and this will allow us to lower our costs for the benefit of consumer and community.
So when you said expand, are you talking like having more stations, or have there been any challenges or pushback in you getting more stations or finding more stations or people to work with?
We have had some challenges, yes. Right now, our fixed costs are incredibly high. We have a lot of the overhead that the big players have, but with only one small station. So the best way forward from here is to expand. Last year, we did put forward a proposition to expand on West Bay Road, and we were refused planning permission.
So when you say refuse, what reasons or what was the purpose for the refusal? I'm just curious now.
I believe the quote was, "We failed to demonstrate that the gas station would serve the needs of the community."
Not a planning requirement, is it?
We went to appeal on those grounds, and we lost appeal.
So then, I'm sorry, in terms of your study then, is there anywhere else that you guys have looked elsewhere on the island that you think, because I can tell within the Eastern District, we definitely need competition up that side. And I would love to have some of low prices up on my side. I mean, have you guys looked there, or are you getting similar pushback?
We're looking around all over. Our primary goal was this first location. We went to planning a year ago in April, and it's taken up until now to adjust our plans and try and get planning permission again. We looked at a few other locations in the area. One of our biggest requests from customers is that we're too far away from them. So we're absolutely looking to go out east, but also probably towards West Bay.
Okay, you said yeah, some of the high fixed costs similar to the bigger players. Like, what would those high fixed costs entail?
In Cayman, it's really everything that goes into running a business. A lot of these have been shown on the income statements that we've given to Offreg, but we do have a high cost of living in Cayman, and we cover everything throughout the supply chain. So we have insurance from Florida to Cayman. We have the salaries, we have bank commission fees, and we do have some regulatory constraints and fees, but I would say actually they're on the smaller end of our fixed costs.
And what do you see as, well, like, what is the optimum amount of stations do you think you need to have in order to really, excuse me, achieve economies of scale or make a business more scalable and a model more profitable?
We need, this is a little complicated, a question, because knowing exactly what the optimum volume is quite difficult. But in a bit, I might go on to our pricing structure. We use a demand-based model, and this model essentially tells us what our optimum price point should be. And right now, we're constrained. We can't physically bring more cars to our station, and it's only through increasing our volume sold that we'd be able to lower our costs. So at this time, the more stations we could build, we would have revenue enhancements from having more stations. But additionally, there are some cost-saving synergies involved with having other stations. There's a lot of our fixed costs that could be allocated towards multiple locations.
Yeah, does the fact that the other major fuel companies themselves own retail outlets an impediment to your expansion, or?
We don't look to the competition in that sort of game. We believe that our product is superior and that we will be able to gain market share where we move. Certainly the demand at our current location has been overwhelming to the point where we now are at capacity, and this was within a short time frame.
I was going to get back to the reason why you were refused planning permission, because I believe that some of the, if not all, of the current retail outlets on the 7 Mile Beach corridor are owned by the major fuel companies who have wholesale license?
I can't speak to their ownership arrangement or the reasons that they got planning permission in those areas. I do know that there is a precedent for having stations in the zoning that we applied for, but that's as far as I can speak to what the reasons we didn't get permission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, I want to go back to your business model. Is it correct to state that what makes Refuel as a retailer different than the rest of the retailers is that you cut out the middleman? You don't purchase your supply from Rubis or Sol. Is that correct?
That is one of the parts of our model, whether you refer to it as middlemen or marginalities that are being removed. But I do not see how you could be competitive whilst purchasing from one of them on island as an independent station.
So so you don't buy from Rubis or Sol. Is it correct to state that you buy direct from the market?
We buy from the US market.
Would that be out of Port Everglades, Florida, or where are you buying from?
We, when we first opened, spent a considerable amount of time shopping around for available options. And in the States, the people we buy from are called jobbers. And they essentially go to various racks and then sell it on or have supply arrangements with petrol stations in the region. So we have a particular jobber that we have a very good relationship with and have been working with for some time. And they're a major supplier in that region. And I forgot shortly the first part of your question, but in essence, we have another jobber as well that we use to keep our prices honest.
And through you, Mr. Chairman, could you state in terms, you stated earlier on that your product, in your opinion, is far superior. Could you state what the octane quality of the gasoline product that you bring in is?
Perhaps I misspoke in that something is superior. There are trade-offs for everything. So our goal was to make the modern emission-reducing fuels that are supported in the National Energy Policy commonplace in Cayman. The National Energy Policy specifically relates to E10 and B5, both of which we sell in Cayman. There's incontrovertible evidence that the addition of ethanol to gasoline reduces emissions, and the introduction of biodiesel to diesel reduces emissions. So from that standpoint, they are superior. Other than that, we meet the exact same quality standards of the other importers.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, through you, when we look at the cost breakdown, we determined last week from the fuels director of the various layers or margins that affect the price of fuel by the time it gets to the pump. There's a supplier cost, which comes directly from the refinery to the distributor, which is usually one of the ports, Gulf Coast, New York, or otherwise. Most of the fuel for the Cayman Islands comes out of the Gulf Coast, Port Everglades. There's the first margin. That then arrives to the Cayman Islands. There's the fixed costs of customs duty, freight, insurance, port fees, which adds another layer of margin. That then goes to the distributor, which excludes refuel, which tax on the distribution, the pipeline fees, or otherwise rack price that Rubis and Sol, the two main suppliers, then provide on to the retailers. At that wholesale point, there's yet again another margin, which refuel does not have to pay because they buy direct. Rubis and Sol then, as we heard testimony today, allow a further margin to be decided on by the retail gas stations to determine the price at the pumps. If we look, and not knowing what your pricing structure is, if we look at, but you did say that you buy fuel out of the US from the US market. The EIA website, US Energy Information Administration, provides pricing on gasoline, heating, low sulfur diesel, and propane. At today's pricing, gasoline coming out of the Gulf Coast is selling at $1.25 US per US gallon. We discovered earlier on through the fantastic mathematics of the member from Bordentown West that we convert from US gallon to imperial gallon. We simply convert the price from US to CI. So 125 CI plus 15 cents for freight and insurance, 75 cents for duty, plus 4 cents for port charges, works out to approximately $2.30 CI landed cost. The member from Bordentown West reminds me of transportation costs, so we add on another 8 cents in miscellaneous. Takes our price up to $2.45. A look at the off-reg pricing, because the off-reg website lists the pricing that is available at all gas stations, and according to their website today, refuel is selling their premium at $3.82, their ethanol 10 or E10 at $3.70, and regular at $3.37. If we use the landed figure of an average of $2.30 landed, we are seeing a markup to the pumps, to the consumer, of 205% on premium, 196% on E10, and 169% on regular fuel. Are those margins about correct from your standpoint?
I
382, 317, 337.
would address pricing separately in a moment, but I don't believe your percentages are correct.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I think one of the things, sorry, just to expand on my colleague from Prospect, what he was getting at, one of the things that we were a little bit confused on from our earlier testimony was we looked at when Rubis was here, they had basically used an example that typically the price in the Gulf is about $1.50 US per gallon. And going back from previous reports that they had produced, we knew that their shipping cost was around 15 cents a gallon. The government duty would have been about 75 cents. So basically we're talking about a landed cost of $2.40, and by the time you add on maybe port fees, you're talking more than $2.45 in terms of cost. And this is normal time, not pre-COVID and everything else. But in those cases, we realized that it was going to the pump at basically $5, $5.50. In other words, anywhere from $2.50 to $3 was being added on at the pump in normal times. And what we were trying to determine was what was driving their costs. Now, granted, using the figures that the member for Prospect raised, I think your markup would have been roughly around less than 50% of their markup in terms of what it is that they were doing. Now, we know that from different means that the retailers, I think, may have a margin of about maybe 30 cents per each gallon is what they pretty much have to play with. And we were trying to determine where then of the $3 and their 10% is going to the retailers, what drives that 270? Now, granted that your markup, based on the calculation my colleague did, is nowhere close to that markup. We're still trying to figure out what it is in terms of the cost that actually drives that number outside of the normal fixed cost. Like what else is that really driving that number? Because what we're trying to get at is what we need to do, or what is it that we can fix to kind of help your cost to come down so the consumer can get basically cheaper fuel.
Mr. Chairman, just if I may correct my mathematics, certainly I was basing my percentages on the U.S. price. The margin between 230 and what refuel is selling at, premium at 382, that's 66% margin. E10 is a 60% margin, and regular fuel 46% margin or increase. Would those percentages be closer to your present pricing model?
I don't have my calculator on, but those seem close. Everything I said is correct except for your last sentence where you said close to my pricing model. Let me address my pricing model now because this has come up a couple times. I think we at Refuel do something quite unique. We do not have a cost-plus marketing model. We don't have a competitive-based marketing model either. We do something called demand-based. What this does essentially is the consumer decides our price for us. Over the last 3 years, we've collated data of our price points relative to the national average and the volume sold at each volume. By doing this, we can construct what's referred to as a marginal analysis, and it essentially tells you what your optimum price point is.
Mr. Chairman, problem I have with demand-based pricing is much like what determines real estate prices in the Cayman Islands. Real estate prices aren't based on the value of the product, they're based on the value of what the last property sold for. In Refuel's case, certainly they will, by bypassing the middleman, Rubis and Sol, they're bringing product cheaper than the competition, no question about it. But if they sold their price for 5 cents or 10 cents cheaper than the competition, that's still 5 cents or 10 cents cheaper that the market would otherwise say, yes, I'm prepared to pay for that. But what that market is prepared to pay, which may very well be a discount on what is presently being charged, does not represent the true value of that product. And if the off-reg model states that rather than setting price control, they are encouraging price reduction through competition, then is it not arguable that the prices at Refuel, based on their supply chain model, could be considerably cheaper than what their demand-based model, which suggests, as the witness gave evidence, what the market is prepared to pay for it? Just a statement. You don't have to respond to it.
Yeah, one of the things we're curious about, and in terms of the actual, I just want to try to understand the fixed costs as a fairly new business, because one of the things that Saul, I think, had testified before, that the return on their was it investments or assets was like around 5%, and we were a bit. I was a bit surprised that the number being that low, and also that their net profit was around 5% of their sales, which again I was a little bit surprised at. But one of the things I do recognize is that when you have very small margins, like say 30, 40, 50 cents a gallon, and then you have considerable fixed costs, have there been any new regulations that have driven up your costs that would also impact your pricing from that standpoint?
Yes. One of the ways that we are able to import the way we do is that we have to control the supply chain. Otherwise, we would have what's referred to as hold-up problems. In order to control the supply chain, we had a huge amount of capital investments. Those capital investments are depreciated and have to be repaid over time. Particularly, though, there is some legislation that has driven up our capital costs. In 2017, I believe the Dangerous Substance Law was passed, and it outlawed the loading of trucks by one particular method. To come in compliance with that law in 2017, we have now had to build a $1.5 million facility, and it's taken us 3 years to do so. This significantly drives up our PPE and our capital costs, changes our capital structure, and that will have to be repaid.
All right, and this is just from my own understanding. You said the loading of, is it the trucks?
Yes.
I'm just trying to understand that, so I'm not familiar with that. This is not my industry, but just curious, like, how did that work, or how does that come about?
Sorry, let me clarify. There are two methods that you can load a truck at the rack. One is called the top loading method. It's where you fill the truck quite literally from the top. You have someone on top and you fill it. You can build infrastructure to do this, and in the US, it's around, there's certainly a plurality of trucks that are loaded this way. The other method is a bottom loading method. It's where you attach the fill point with a coupler to the bottom of the truck, and the truck fills up, and you have overfill protection systems that tell you when the truck is full. At the time the law was passed, there was mobile delivery done through the bottom loading station, and there was mobile delivery by an independent company done through the top loading method. This law with a stroke of a pen essentially outruled the top loading method and the competition of that company. For the next few years, in order to come in compliant with this bottom loading method, because we want to compete in this industry as part of our goals to increase supply and lower costs, it's taken about a $1.5 million investment, and it's coming up on 3 years in January.
Can you what's the difference between bottom loading and top loading in terms of safety and
It's up for debate. The reasons given to us here are that someone has to be on top of the truck for top loading, and so there's a fall risk.
is from the truck exploding, or
No, it's.
for the person sitting on top? I mean,
I'm not an expert in rack systems and bulk petroleum loading systems, but one of the reasons given to us in the past was that the person on top might fall.
but I would think that some kind of bosun chair, which would be familiar to the Maras, or some kind of rigging could have solved our problem short of a $1.5 million plus investment to load from the bottom. So when you load it from the bottom, nobody's around the truck, or just because they're standing on the ground, they don't expect them to fall?
There's no one standing on the top. There is a set of NFPA compliant laws that we have to be compliant with, and we're building to that standard. But in essence, it is a quicker and safer method. But if your objective was to lower costs, perhaps that could have been weighed off against those codes.
So if that costs you $1.5 million,
This is about.
Yeah, 1.5, that's fine. And you're making about $1 in each gallon. I mean, that's 1.5 million gallons of gas that you have to sell just to pay for that. How long will it take you to, plus in addition to your other costs, I mean, that's just to cover that cost. I mean, how long would you pretty much have to be to sell at 1.5 million to recoup that cost? Just out of curiosity.
The depreciation is significant. And as mentioned, we don't actually price entirely based off those costs, but a failure of the demand system would be in an event where you're not covering those costs. So we do take that into account. Yeah, years. We're talking years and years.
Well, from one change. Are there any other regulations that would change that would have pretty much impacted your business, or something that you think needs to change that could actually help your business? Because we actually want more competition in the market, and we're trying to figure out what we need to do or what can be done to get this market more competitive.
Well, one of the benefits of our system is that when a marginal cost falls, it's incentivized for us to lower our price, because demand will increase by a percentage of that. So any scenario that would lower our marginal cost relative to the competition would be an advantage to us. One clear way that we see that is a percentage of our fuel is renewable. It's not petroleum product. If the duty was to be waived or reduced on that small percentage of renewable content that was being imported, that price savings would almost directly be passed on to the consumer, with the exception that we are currently at capacity and would not be able to sell that volume. We need more stations.
Just one other question on the bottom loading versus top loading. Were the other fuel companies already in a position to do bottom loading?
Yes, I believe so.
Understood.
That's fine. You were saying something earlier about the duty being waived on. Yeah, no, that was one of your. Well, you can ask the question, because that's one of your motions that you had dealt with. So,
You pay duty currently on volume like everybody else, or do you pay on CIF?
Actually, I don't know what CIF is.
Cost, insurance, and freight.
No, we pay on volume pay per gallon amount, yes.
Okay. And what you were just suggesting is because yours is a mix of renewable fuel, the ethanol, and you buy it already mixed.
Correct. There's two examples here. The gasoline we do import already pre-blended, and a percentage of it is that ethanol content. The biodiesel we used to manufacture locally. We used to go around the restaurants, collect the waste vegetable oil that was being thrown away, turn it into biodiesel and blend it in. It became prohibitively difficult. This is one example of where regulations came in. It was being treated for a very long time as a petroleum product, even though it's a non-toxic substance that biodegrades as fast as sugar water. So that did cause problems. We are now importing biodiesel not blended predominantly. We're actually doing both. But that biodiesel that we import is also being charged at a duty at, actually I believe 22%, because there was nowhere in the tariff code, I need to confirm those numbers, there was nowhere in the tariff code for biodiesel. So customs, for lack of better explanation, picked a duty rate to charge it.
Sorry, hold on, but you guys are going around, sorry, let's just so I can understand this, and collecting all the restaurant oil, the food oil.
A separate but affiliated company was, yes.
And so if you guys stop doing that, because you guys are actually taking that recycling and doing something with it, making diesel with it.
Correct.
Yeah. And you have been stopped from doing that?
We have had, I'm afraid to say, more obstacles than I can go into in this time in setting up that program in Cayman.
So, okay, I consider that almost like a public service to some extent. So the question is then, with all these restaurants and all these oils around the place, what are they doing with it then?
There was, we went and looked at the DEH facility at one point. It's collected and exported to the US. But you can go have a look at the DEH facility that currently treats this.
Well, I'm sorry, it's now collected and exported to the US, so it's been sold to somebody in the US?
Since for minimal amount. It's being mixed with motor oils and other things and just shipped the most efficient. Actually, I don't really want to talk about it. This is what I believe is happening. But it is definitely being put in a container with other oils that can't be treated in Cayman and exported.
But you had, in a sense, started, in a sense, then a business here of taking something like that and putting it to use here, which would have been, I guess, better for our economy versus now it's just being shipped off.
Yes, that's how we started. We realized, though, that we couldn't market. This is actually the foundations of refuel. We created this company to recycle biodiesel on island. We quickly learned that no one else on island would add it into their fuel supply as they do in the US or other places where they encourage these things. So we had to create our own gas station to bring our fuel to market and circumvent the existing infrastructure. So we set up refuel as a way to bring this product to market. There are problems with this volume of it. We need to get to a certain volume, and at times that volume isn't available at Cayman. We did realize this quite early on and approached customs, Michael might be able to tell me, 7 years ago, and asked them if we could import waste vegetable oil from the US to supplement our product and get to a volume that could maybe work in Cayman. But we were told that it would be charged at a duty rate of full food-grade vegetable oil and not the waste product that it was, which essentially killed that endeavor.
Mr. Chairman, I'm speechless.
Just so I will understand, but when you're suggesting that if they would give you a reduced duty on one, your biodiesel, and two, on your ethanol blended, you could actually lower the price, or would I be able to keep the price stable if they treated that section of your business as renewable energy? Because I thought under the customs law that renewable energy, things related to renewable energy were duty-free now. And we'll have that research, but that's what I thought.
I could sit down with you on another time and show you our demand curve, if you like, and show you the effect that that duty reduction would have on our prices.
Okay.
In terms of what is it, because it is, I would think, in the public's best interest for your organization to expand in order to compete. Of course, I mean, naturally to get scalable and get the prices down. What can be done, or is there anything that we can do? In essence, just like and Michael will be the best one to tell you, when we went through and liberalize the telecoms market, we have put certain safeguards in place to allow new entrants not to be overpowered by the existing players. Is there anything that we can do? Because what I'm fearful of is the two established players at this point basically combining or using similar tactics to basically limit your business in terms of what it is that you can do and bring to the market. And to some extent, and in other countries, there are incentives, and both in legislation and in regulations, to allow new entrants to get into a market to compete to bring prices down. Is there something that we can do or something that we need to do to make it easier for your business to expand and basically start pushing lower prices across the island? Because I will accept that with the fixed costs that you have, running it through one station you will not get any major economies of scale. So what can we do to get it pushed out across the island and pretty much bring prices down more?
It would be naive of me not to address the competitive threat from the competition, but certainly it's non-market forces that have a lot of sway in this area. So the ways you could help are any incentives that encourage competition. For instance, the one that keeps coming to the tip of my tongue, the planning permissions. That has set us back tens of thousands of dollars and years of time. If we could speak with someone who could align the visions of the departments to your visions so that we could accomplish our mutual goals, that would be of a lot of help.
Just when you applied for planning permission, is planning in a position to supply you with a set of criteria to which you must build your stations, and once you build that, planning permission once you meet those criteria, planning permission would have to be granted? I don't think the planning authority has the authority to delve into the markets and set demands and regulate.
Michael may actually be interested in addressing this because this was part of our appeal at tribunal.
Michael Alberga. Mr. Chairman, the position with the planning situation was that we complied with all the parameters necessary to build the station. In fact, the station was going in close proximity to the existing station on West Bay Road. It was the opinion of the majority of the board that the station didn't serve the immediate needs of the community. And for that reason, the station was turned down. So there is, in our opinion, a misalignment between the government's national energy policy and the views of the planning board or the majority of the board in regard to whether a station which produces gasoline on ethanol basis is in the needs of the community, because the government has designated that in its national policy. The board has a different view of what is in the needs of the community from that of the government's policy. And for that reason, it was turned down. And to the earlier questions, the capital cost in Cayman of land and building stations, or any building, is significant. And when those costs are spread over a limited market, the margins are completely different, as they are in major countries. So, to enhance the policy, there needs to be some incentives on the construction of the station, the fees that it costs. Because the fixed costs of electricity, labor, etc., are basically fixed. There's nothing you can do about that. And as you know, Cayman's population is small, so you don't get a lot of volume, so you have to spread the capital costs over many, many more years. I mean, for instance, when this station was built, there are electronic lighting on the top of the station, which gives the pricing. And at one corner, there was no electronic pricing required when the planning permission was granted. And before we could open the station, new electronic lighting had to be put up on all four corners of the building. That cost a lot of money to redo that whole enterprise. So, you know, whether that is a cost beneficial analysis for people who drive by a station, most people in Cayman at least have the intelligence to look at the pump or to know what the price of gas is going to be before they get there. In America, they have these huge signs. The reason is normally you're traveling down a highway at high speed and you have to see the sign. But you know, to have a regulation that you need these huge signs and letters all over them may not be necessary. Those things cost not a small amount of money. So as you add to the capital costs, the time to recover any, you know, your capital and return on investment is significantly stretched out. And that is why the stations with the figures that you're probably given for the other stations are probably right. The amount of money you make from gasoline is marginal. The money is made on the service part of it, where you go in and buy food or whatever. Without that, the price of gasoline may be doubled. So that's just about where we are on the economies of scale and the pricing, fixed costs of building and land, etc. That's significant. So for this station to succeed, we need more stations. We're at capacity now, so that the fuel that is brought in can be brought in bigger quantities at cheaper prices, less shipping, etc., etc., and that can be passed on. In a nutshell, I'm just giving it an overview. Thank you.
What has, in terms of off-reg, have any of these issues been raised with off-reg, and what has their response been in that regard?
We've had a generally good working relationship with off-reg. As mentioned so far today, they haven't been the issue of note, but that pricing story that just came up was from them.
That is one of the marquee success of off-reg, is an electronic sign that gives you the price of the fuel.
I think it was good for the retail stations in general, but when we imported more choice for the consumer, we have 5 different products. Having all that up there was a little unnecessary in our regard.
Yeah, just in terms of moving forward, because, I mean, how do we get refueler? And this is something I just wanted to think about, because we can have a separate conversation or separate meeting on this, but just to think through what it is that we can do in order to allow, outside of the planning issue that is, in terms of pushing to get more stations. But if just get a chance to think through and just reach back out to any one of us or the entire committee through the clerk to give us an idea of what can be done to get your business up and running, because sorry, it's good to see a Caymanian owned business starting out from this level and growing. And one of the things that has, and I really don't care, I'll say it, is that we just need to do more for local businesses, especially to come on to the energy security and everything else. And I am really happy to see a young business like this started from Cayman and has continued to do well. But we need to do more to ensure that that business succeeds, because at the end of the day, the money that you make here stays here. And as with any country, we would want the money made here to stay here. I mean, that's just the reality of it, versus money being shipped elsewhere. And I make no apologies for that statement. And so, yes, I do play favoritism when it comes on to business, especially if they're Cayman-owned business. And with that said, I mean, I just like for you to like have a think through. I mean, even if you have to discuss it with off-reg to see what else can be done for us to encourage greater Caymanian ownership of this market. And because I will say this much, I really want for your business to do well, because at the end of the day, the money stays here, the people that employ are people who live here. Just like, I mean, not that others don't, but ultimately, the profit from this staying here. And we will take a look back at that fuel issue with the customs duty. I can say that the member for Northside, I think, as a motion in to directly look at volume and cost when it comes down to fuel and everything else to see if there's any progress that we can make in that regard. But my last question to you is actually going to be a little reversal, a little bit different. Is there any questions that you have for us that you think that we should be doing or things that we can actually do better?
I believe the most beneficial point we touched upon earlier, and that would be the alignment of all involved with the goals that you would like to accomplish. You say some great laudable things for the benefit of Cayman. Whether that's actually being acted on the ground is a different story.
Thank you very much, Mr. Travers and Mr. Alberga, for coming, and it was a very pleasant experience. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
And we wish you well. Welcome. The meeting is suspended until 3 when the next witness arrives.